this week, what you're expected to do is to form a group, and let's take a look at our group project preparation. So you each are going to be participating in the project. It's truly not optional, and I don't want to hear, oh, I don't like group projects. Can I do it on my own? I'll tell you, I don't much like group projects either, but no, you may not do it on your own. You're required to do it in a group, and I'm looking for groups of 4, not 3, not 5. I'm looking for groups of 4. Okay, so just do it that way, I promise. We'll go over the group project.
To assign us, or do we pick it ourselves?
I would like for you guys to at least partially pick them yourselves, so you can choose people that you're comfortable with, or you've worked with, or you know them a little bit. So I'd love for you guys to form your own groups, but to the extent that you need assistance with that, I'm happy to form groups for you and introduce you to some of your classmates, because I know this Zoom environment is hard to make personal connections and get to know people.
I think that to the extent that work better.
Well, I'm going to give you guys first shot at it, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. And then to the extent I need to, I'm going to just toss people in your groups. So I'd like to actually get through that today. So we'll get to that in just a second here. I'm going to walk through the group project assignment with you and explain the expectations and what you'll be submitting and turning in and your presentation. And then we'll work on our group project formation. And then we'll talk about where to research, where to find resources, and I'll show you some tools that you can use. What you'll need to do once you have your group formed is exchange contact information, decide how you're going to share work, and divide the responsibilities between your group members. This absolutely can be done in a fully online format or in this high flex format. It shouldn't be any issue. I've had students do it successfully the last couple semesters, so I'm totally not worried about that. But the key is going to be communication with your group, doing what you say you're going to do, deciding how you're going to communicate, deciding how you're going to share documents. So I recommend setting up some kind of shared folder like a Google Drive, and having documents in there that you're sharing and putting your research in, having a Google Sheet where you're putting in data and stock price and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to give you some tips with that, but really the key to success on this is communicating with your group and doing what you say you're going to do. And if people do that, I expect it all to go smoothly. So let me run through the group project assignment with you. Just gonna... It's trying to open. We're getting there. All right, so in terms of the group project assignment, can you guys see the document with me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, thank you. All right, so it makes clear you're going to form a group of 4 students. You're going to submit that list of group members to the instructor. That's me. Hopefully we're going to just knock that out in class. I see some of you already forming groups on the chat. There's also a discussion forum this week that I want you to utilize to communicate that with me. I'll show you what to do. Don't fret, but you're all going to be in a group. Okay, if we don't have even numbers, then there might be a group of 3 or one group of 5. We'll figure it out, but plan on a group of 4. Okay. Ultimately, big picture, you're going to be choosing 2 publicly traded companies, and I'd recommend that you choose companies that are of interest to you, companies that operate in an industry that you find interesting, and those companies need to be direct competitors. So they essentially, they go up against each other, that they would be taking customers from one another, that they compete in the same industry. Okay, and ultimately you're going to be analyzing those 2 companies on various criteria that I'm going to give you, and finally you're going to recommend which company's stock you would buy and fully explain why. There is no right or wrong answer as long as you support your reasoning with business and financial reasons. So you can't be right or wrong, you just need to support your answer. Sometimes I have groups that they really can't decide, and it comes down to just, where can we find better support, better reasoning. In terms of your research, this is not a library type project. This is an online research type project. You're going to be looking on the internet. I gave you some suggested resources, NASDAQ.com, Yahoo Finance, which oddly, that's kind of my favorite of these. It doesn't sound very sophisticated, but I'll show you they've got really great tools in kind of an easy to use format. Edgar, which is the SEC database where you can find a company's annual reports, and there's instructions on that in Appendix A of your textbook. Other things you should look at is Appendix C of your textbook, which includes financial ratios. So I'll take a couple notes for you here. Add in Appendix C for financial ratios. Another good one would be Investopedia.com. That's a good one for understanding ratios. Investopedia. So those are all great resources. And again, this is going to be pretty much internet research. I encourage you to use credible sources. Wikipedia is not a credible source. It's a good start and it might point you toward information, but don't use that as your only source, okay? As you're doing this project, make sure you keep track of your sources. You are expected to have some form of a works cited telling us where you got all this info, okay? I'm going to move down all the way to the bottom, and then I'm going to scribble on the screen. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to move down to the bottom, and I'm going to come back and cover 1 through 7. The bottom being the next page. Ultimately, on Tuesday of week 16, you're going to be turning in one formal written report, one paper for the group, okay? I say formal written report. It should be in an essay format, just not numbers and bullets answering questions. It should be formal written in a essay tone, explaining, what you're doing and going through all of the aspects of the project, arriving at a concluding paragraph with your decision of which company you would invest in. Within that report, you should include any relevant charts and graphs, and you should have a works cited. You need to turn this in as either a Word or a PDF document. Don't use other like Apple type things because I don't do fruit computers. So Word or PDF, pretty please. I get a lot of students will say, well, what format should it be in? Well, if you know how to write MLA style, that would be great. I would love that. Or APA is fine as well. If you don't know any of those, I'm not going to teach you. That's not my problem. Just make it good. So I'm far more concerned with the content of your paper than I am with the format of it. So MLA is great, APA is great, or none of the above, but it needs to be a formal written paper with a works cited. I will not be critical of how you cite and where you put the comma and the parenthesis and the period, as long as you do in fact cite. If you take somebody else's ideas, if you quote somebody, then you simply need to tell me where you got it from. So I will not be harsh in terms of grading your citations, as long as you do have citations. I will not be harsh in grading the format of your works cited or your big bibliography, as long as you have a works cited or bibliography. Does that make sense?
Yes, very much so.
All right. I try not to be picayune about those issues. I just want you to be able to write and write well and not get caught up in the details. Another question I usually get is, how long should the paper be? And the answer is thorough. It needs to answer 1 through 7 above that we're about to go through. And, if I make some assumptions that we're using double-spaced, 1-inch margins, 12-point font, I would say your paper probably will be 10 to 12 pages. And some of you are thinking, oh, 10 to 12 pages, that's really long. Actually, you're going through a lot of criteria for 2 companies, and there's 4 of you in this group, and you're going to insert relevant charts and graphs in your paper. 10 to 12 pages is nothing. Some of you will turn in something that's 15 to 18 pages. I would say if you're going any longer than 15, you might want to question, you know, is everything in here relevant? Am I including too much information? You know, I don't need the paper to start out that, you know, once upon a time on a dark, stormy night, a baby was born who then 40 years later became the CEO of a company. I don't need that level of history. So make sure that what you're writing is relevant to the question of which company should we invest in. But I'll tell you that I don't even need you to number the pages. Longer isn't better. But I think if you just answer all the questions thoroughly, the paper will naturally be the correct length. If you're only turning in a 4-page paper, I can tell you that something's wrong and that you haven't thoroughly answered all of the questions. There's no way you could do it in that amount of pages. So I would say around 10 to 12 is about normal. But again, I don't need you to number the pages even. You should if you're using MLA or APA, but I don't need you to. I'm going to read your paper and I'm going to check it for thoroughness, not the number of pages. Okay. The second aspect of the project, and these are 50-50, 50 points for the written report, 50 points for the oral presentation. So in class on Tuesday of week 16, you'll be doing an oral presentation using visual aids, most likely something like PowerPoint or Google Slides. Those visual aids need to include relevant charts, graphs, data, in, you know, good format that your classmates can read and understand what you're talking about. So for your class, this will be a live Zoom presentation. For my fully online class, it'll likely be video submissions, or they'll make appointments with me during office hours. But for your class, we'll be presenting together on Zoom that day on Tuesday, I think it's November 30th. And all the group members need to participate in those oral presentations. When I say Zoom, or it could be in person, you can come in the classroom too, because we're high flex. So, but all the group members need to participate in that presentation, and hopefully participate somewhat equally. And the presentation should be well rehearsed. We should be convinced that you're the classroom experts on the 2 companies that you've selected, and you should know who's going to say what and who's going next, and you know, it should flow. So we need to be convinced that the presentation is well rehearsed. Do you have to stand up? Well, if you're in the classroom, yes, you'll need to come up to the front of the classroom. If you're on Zoom, I don't really care if you're standing or sitting. But ideally, I would like to have your camera on if you're going to be on Zoom. We would like to see your beautiful faces and your lips moving and understand what you're saying. So that would be fantastic. So usually the question I get on the oral presentation is, how long should it be? I'm going to say probably 12 to 15 minutes. I don't know how many groups we have in the class. Sometimes I actually have to limit the time. So, you know, plan on not going over 15 to 16 minutes. And again, I know some of you are thinking, wow, that's really long presentation. Yeah, but actually with 4 of you and all the things I'm going to ask of you about these 2 companies, it's going to go by so fast. You might actually be working to make your presentation more concise and cutting out material so that you're getting to the point. You might find that 15 minutes goes by really quickly, and you're going to have to manage your time well. So I don't want you to worry about the length as much as I want you to consider the material that you're writing about, the material that you're presenting to your classmates. So once I know how many groups we have in the class, then I'll tell you if what the specific time limit is. But I would suggest, I mean, if your presentation is less than 10 minutes, you're probably not being thorough enough. And
I was just thinking, I mean, then like you said, 12 to 15 minutes doesn't seem long, because you figure 4 people, you would estimate or guesstimate something like, you know, 3 minutes per person, you know, that would be 12 minutes.
Yeah, it's really nothing. So I think it's more of an effort at making sure that you concisely and clearly cover what needs to be covered. And it's 2 companies and a whole bunch of criteria and 4 people. So there's a lot of stuff to cover in 15 minutes. So I think it's not about making it longer. It's more about being concise and getting to your point in a efficient manner. So I'll let you know what the specific time limit is once I know how many groups are in the class. And And then notice the little asterisk there, all group members will complete a confidential peer review of other group members. When it comes to group projects, I've been burned a bunch of times on group projects. I will tell you, I'm not a huge fan. I've had so many bad group project experiences. It makes me sick. I really hope that you have a great group project experience in this class. I do hold students accountable, and I do not guarantee that everybody in the group gets the same grade. You know, the best grade in the group will reflect the quality of work that is turned in. So if the quality of work that's turned in is only C quality work, then that'll be the highest grade given to any group member. But that said, if there's group members that didn't pull their weight, they're not going to get a grade. I have no problem giving one person in the group an A and another person in the group a 50% F and another person in the group a 0. If you don't contribute, you don't get a grade. So there is no free ride here. There is no riding the coattails of your brilliant group members. So everybody needs to plan to roll up your sleeves and do your share of work. And if you're going to slack off, please just tell your group at the beginning, hey, I'm really not interested in doing this project, and let them know that so they can cover your tail. I don't like surprises. I don't like group drama. But if it exists, you do need to tell me about it, and you need to include that in your peer review. And I can assure you that I've been on unfortunately, I guess, the wrong end of some instructor decisions. I had a group once that I swear I did all of the work. It was a fantastic project and nobody really helped me. And then my group members complained that I was abrasive. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I was abrasive because I called you out for not doing your work. And they complained to the instructor and they all got A's and I got a B. So
I had that issue too in my first business class, and we had a group project. But you know, you professors are pretty smart at kind of seeing who's really actually putting in the work, because I had her send me a personal email, you know, stating that, hey, can you let me know, because I can kind of tell who really did the work and who didn't.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm going for. I'm pissed off and bitter that I always was the one that did all the work. And yeah, exactly, Natalie, the audacity of somebody to complain that I was abrasive because I said, hey, you guys didn't do your work and now I got to do it. So, all right, Snowflake, put on your big kid pants. I just had to do all your work for you. So yeah, I can call you out that you didn't do what you were supposed to do. You know,
our professors back then, he made us all write contracts in the class, and we had any right in there to whoever wasn't doing the work. We had the right to fire them, give them an F in the class, and we had to do that to at least 2 of our group members out of like a 6-person project. And we gave them anything. And my teacher, he's like, whatever is said in the contract and that I signed to it, that's what we did. So they failed and we passed.
All right. And so I'm not trying to make anybody fail is the reality. I'm trying to encourage you all to be good group members and roll up your sleeves and get the work done. But you have to be accountable to each other. And if somebody calls you out and says, hey, you were supposed to have this done by yesterday, you know, where is it? Don't come back at them rudely. Say, I'll get on it right now. Like, it's not their fault. You didn't do your work. So as a group member, all of you need to hear this. Set expectations, say what you're going to do, put it in writing, who's going to do what, set a timeline as to when things are going to be turned into your group or, you know, shared on your group file. But set expectations, set due dates and a timeline, and hold each other accountable. And then if somebody's not doing what they're supposed to do, then you have to say, I'm sorry, you're not doing what you have to do. Then I'm going to have to do it for you, which that's unfortunate. So that I get the grade I want on this project and you're not going to get the grade. So you guys need to be good communicators. You need to be assertive and you need to be accountable. And there will be a peer review, and I do consider it. And I'm not afraid to give one person a 0 and one person an A. So just know that, okay? That's where I'm coming from. So let's go back and look at the project criteria. So you're going to be choosing 2 companies. I think I offered the example of Walmart versus Target, which you're not allowed to do. I never want to see that project again. I'm so bored with it. Okay. So be a little more creative than that. There's tons of publicly traded companies. There's tons of industries outside of retail. I see a lot of the same projects come up year after year, so I encourage you to be creative, and I'll give you some sources where to find that. Your project's going to start with number one, a description of each company's products and markets. So when I say products and markets, meaning how do they make money? It could be a product, it could be a service. And when we say markets, who do they sell to? Where do they sell? Who's their target market? That could be demographically, that could be geographically, that could be, are they selling to other businesses? Are they selling retail or wholesale? Are they selling to consumers? Like, how do they make money? Okay, so you're going to explain that. I recommend that you look at the company's 10K. That would be a good start. Review the company's website and just some basic internet research. And probably some of the companies you're choosing, you're already somewhat familiar with. Number two, you're going to look at any significant news in roughly the past year. Obviously, more recent news is more relevant to your decision today about which company you should invest in. So the older the news is, probably the less helpful it is. But if something really interesting happened a year ago, or even 13 or 14 months ago, and you find it to be really interesting and helpful in making this decision, that's fine. That's okay. It's roughly the past year. So you want to find articles from respectable sources, and then you're going to summarize them into a brief and meaningful synopsis. Ultimately, what you want to point to is, how does this help you make a decision about which company to invest in? And keep that in mind on every single one of these. How does this information, whether it's this article or this piece of financial information, how does it help you decide which company you want to invest in? So as you're selecting articles, keep that in mind, that it's not just an interesting article, but it's a relevant article to your decision, okay? I put in parentheses here, really be careful about plagiarism, especially in this area. If you're quoting the article, then put quotes on it and tell me who said it, you know? Don't claim it to be your own words. It's totally fine to quote somebody as you're explaining the article. I do want you to summarize it into your own words. That would be great. But if somebody said something so well that you need to quote it, then do so and just tell me who you borrowed it from. Okay, so you guys are clear on quoting and plagiarism and how all that works?
Yes, we are.
We should be by now.
We should be by now is the correct answer. Yes. So if you use somebody else's words, just throw quotes on it. Tell me who you got it from. And again, I'm not going to be strict on, you know, where you put the period or the comma or the parenthesis or the quotation mark. Just please quote it, cite it. Okay. Number three, a brief analysis highlighting important issues that could positively or negatively affect the company's future stock performance. Now, first of all, I don't expect you guys to be stock market analysts. I don't expect you to know a whole lot about the stock market. You should, as business majors, you should become familiar with it. And this might be where you first get your feet wet and start paying attention to the stock market, or maybe you've been paying attention to the stock market. But the basic idea, at our beginning level in terms of the stock market, is that we're going to assume, and this isn't always a great assumption, we're going to assume that a company that has good, healthy financial statements, a healthy income statement, a strong balance sheet, that ultimately that is the better company to invest in. That's not always true, but that's going to be kind of the basics of the stock market, that we want to buy low and sell high, and that companies that have healthy financial condition will be rewarded, that their stock price will go up. So that's the basic assumption that we're going to make. But what we'll find out is that the stock market doesn't always work that way. The stock market often is a matter of predicting the future and future expectations. So there's a lot of different factors that will affect that. But if we back up our reasoning with pointing to financial statements, and this company has healthy financial statements, and here's their financial ratios that show that they're in good financial health and that they're well set up to succeed in the future, then we're going to go with that. Okay. So for part three, I need you to consider factors that are primarily non-financial. First, do they have any legal proceedings or litigation that we should know about? Is there big legal matters pending that, you know, we'd want to know before we put our money into this company? You'll find that in the 10K and or in the news. The second one, market risk and environmental factors. So in their particular industry, in their market, are there particular risks that we should be aware of? Are there particular changes that we should be aware of? Are there things that are going on that affect the supply of their raw materials? Or is there, you know, some kind of change pending? When I say environmental factors, that doesn't necessarily mean the natural environment. What I'm talking about is their operating environment. So it could be things like international trade issues. It could be the cost of natural resources. It could be inflation, which we're experiencing right now. It could be taxation issues. It could be political factors. I mean, there's a lot of different things. So when I say environmental factors, it could be the natural environment, but I'm mostly asking other things that affect this particular company's operating environment. So if you're in the auto industry, and for example, there's a strong push to get away from gas cars to electric cars. California passed a bill that we can no longer sell gas cars, I think starting in 2035, everything has to be zero emission electric vehicles. So how does that affect that industry? So that does affect the environment when we talk about pollution, but that's in their operating environment, that this is a law that's been passed in California. Other states will probably follow, but there's a shift in that direction. So that needs to be factored in, that needs to be mentioned in your project that, hey, this company's making good progress toward this goal, and this other company is really not. They haven't really developed a great electric car yet, you know. So that's one example. Another one, maybe I'm looking at food companies. I'm looking at General Mills and Kellogg's, which are, you know, food companies. They do a lot of cereals. And let's say there's massive flooding in the Midwest and it wipes out all of the corn crop. So that's an environmental factor that there's flooding, but what does it do to the price of their inputs? So if it wipes out all the corn crop, then the cost of corn is going to go up, and even the availability of corn might be affected, and they might not be able to produce as much product. So it could be a natural environment factor, or it could be anything that affects their operating environment. And that'll depend on what companies and industry you're looking at. So if you need help brainstorming on those ideas, feel free to ask me once you've selected your companies. And then the last one, it's kind of a catch-all, any other factors specific to the company's industry, which that kind of overlaps with the environmental factors that I was just discussing, but also competitors. So again, if you're in the auto industry and you're looking at Ford versus GM, and you don't mention Honda or Toyota or anybody else, you're missing something. Those two companies don't exist in a vacuum. They're not the only competitors. So you might want to look overall at how those companies stack up with other competitors within the industry. Okay. Again, start by reading the 10K to get some ideas. Look at the news articles. Another note, there could be a lot of overlap between part 2 and part 3. A lot of the things that you read in the news could be things that you're also discussing in part 3. So it's okay to kind of merge those sections together a little bit to the extent that there's overlap. That's fine as long as you cover all of it, okay? That's kind of the business part of the project, 1, 2, and 3. And then we kind of get into the financial part of the project, which is 4, 5, 6. So number 4, you're going to track the stock closing price for each company for 10 consecutive days. Ideally, you do that for 10 consecutive days, Monday through Friday, Monday through Friday. Now that said, that may not happen. We've got Veterans Day coming up next week, and then we've got Thanksgiving. So I'll have to look if the stock market's open on Veterans Day. I feel like it's not, but I'm not 100% sure on that. It's not open on Thanksgiving, I can tell you that. So in terms of your 10 consecutive days, I would love for it to be Monday through Friday, but it'll be what it's going to be. It'll be 10 consecutive stock market days. So whenever you start tracking, track 10 stock market days. The stock market's not open on weekends and not usually on federal banking holidays. So you're going to track 10 days of stock price. I'm going to show you where to find that. You want to get that that data point each day for each company. What I would recommend is that there's a couple of you in your group that are responsible for that, not just one person, and that you agree to use the same website and that you track this data. Maybe you have a shared, thank you, Crystal. It is open on Veterans Day. That you have maybe like a shared Google Sheet on your shared Google Drive where you're going to track this information, and you can, put it there and you can all see, okay, so-and-so tracked that data, we're good, or some, or have somebody double check it. So share that data together, but 10 days of stock closing price. I also want, for number 5, 10 days of PE ratio. Now, we don't know what PE ratio is yet. I'm going to teach you that in chapter 11. For right now, just track it. Okay. I'll show you where to find the PE ratio. Some of you are going to ask me the question, well, what if my PE ratio shows up as NA, meaning not applicable? Track that too. That's not wrong. Just track it. And I'll tell you later what all that means and how to interpret it. For both sections 4 and 5, yes, I do want you to track this data for 10 days, but that's not really what it's all about. We're not going to make a decision about which company to invest in based on 10 days of data. That's not enough. So what I want you to do is present your 10 days of data, and then I want you to show us a longer term stock price chart. And I'll show you how to run that, and I'll show you how to put both companies together on the same stock price graph, and you can show us what's going on. So for part 4, make a note that 10 days is just the start. Then I want to see a longer term stock price chart. Okay. For number 5, you're going to track the PE ratio for 10 days. It's probably not going to be very interesting. It's probably not going to move very much. So really what I'm looking for is that you do it, but then that you provide your analysis, your opinion about that PE ratio. And when we cover chapter 11, we'll talk more extensively about PE ratio. I've also made you a video specific to interpreting and understanding PE ratio. So that you'll find in the group project module when it's time for that. So that's number 4 and 5. Number 6 is financial ratios. We've learned a good handful of financial ratios so far in the class. There's several more financial ratios that we still need to cover. You have an appendix in your textbook. Appendix C, I believe, covers all of the financial ratios in the text, and it gives you a brief, concise place where you can find them, how to compute them, and a brief explanation of what they mean. When it comes to the financial ratios, these are suggested ones: current ratio, debt to equity, earnings per share, gross profit margin, dividends paid per share. That's where I would start. And any other ratios that you deem significant and interesting. Now that could vary depending on which companies and what industry you pick. So what we're looking for throughout this project is what makes these two companies different. And especially we're looking for that in the financial ratios. We can't decide which company to invest in based on what's the same about the two companies. We're looking to find out the difference between the two companies. So maybe in doing this, you're looking at the company's balance sheet and you find out, whoa, this company, they have way too much debt and not enough equity. What are we going to do? So you need to find a ratio that reflects that. That might be the debt to equity ratio that's listed there. So the reality is that the ratios that you select for your project, this is a good starting list, but you want to choose the ratios that help you make a decision. So if you're like, well, yeah, the current ratio, they're about the same for both companies. So you can just mention the current ratio didn't help us decide, it's about the same. So instead we're looking at the debt to assets ratio. Pick whatever ratio actually helps you make a decision about which company is better. Okay. A couple of them I definitely do want to see. That would be the earnings per share, dividend paid per share. So if you're not going to include one of those, you need to have a good reason why, but earnings per share, dividend paid per share, those aren't even ones that you need to compute. I feel like this is the wrong version of this project assignment. Not that this is bad, but I think I gave more instruction on what to include here with the ratios. Please do know that I'm looking ideally for 3 years of financial ratios side by side, presented in a visually pleasing format. And again, I made you a video about exactly this topic, how to take your financial ratio data and turn it into a visual aid. And I do want to see ideally 3 years of financial ratio data side by side for each of these ratios so that we can compare company A versus company B on the current ratio and see which one's better. And then company A versus company B on the debt to equity ratio and the earnings per share, each one showing both companies side by side so that we can make that visual comparison. When it comes to the financial ratios, the key words here are interpretation and explanation. So you might say, well, the current ratio is a measure of liquidity. We divide current assets by current liabilities. Well, that's nice. You should all know that by now. But what I'm looking for is for you to really analyze the current ratio and say, well, they're close, but this one is higher, which tells us that they have more liquidity and they're better able to pay their debts as they come due. So I'm more comfortable investing in company B. Okay, so it's not just a definition and how you computed it, but you know, if these are my numbers, tell me how that makes me feel about investing in these companies and how that helps you decide which one is better. So I'm really looking for that interpretation explanation. And yeah, that is opinion based. It's okay to pull in your opinion when you're basing it on data. Okay, so present the data and then explain how that helps you make your decision. As we're talking about ratios, I just want to give you a quick example. So if we're talking about company A and company B, and we're talking about the current ratio, and I can tell you higher is better. It's a measure of liquidity. So we want a number that's above 1 and higher is better. So what if I tell you company A has a current ratio of 1.5, but company B has a current ratio of 1.7? Well, company B is better, right? They're higher. But here's why I want you to present 3 years. So I told you company A is currently at 1.5, but 2 years ago they're at 1.25. No, let me change that. 2 years ago they were at 1.0. Last year they were at 1.25, and now they're at 1.5. Company B, on the other hand, 2 years ago, they were at 3, and then they went down to 2.5, and now they're at 1.7. Now, which of these companies do you think is doing better?
B.
Mathematically, B is higher, but do you like the direction that the company's headed?
No, because it's going, it was up, then went down.
Yeah, B is on a downhill slide here, that they went from being highly liquid and now they're down to 1.7, which isn't bad, but the direction that they've been heading over the past 3 years is concerning. Where A, 1.5, yeah, slightly less than 1.7, but the direction that they're heading looks better. So based on this information alone, I'm more optimistic about company A. They're heading in the correct direction, which that's why we look at 3 years of financial data, that we don't just, you know, do it based on one static point in time. We look at the direction the company's headed. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Kind of, sort of. And we'll talk a lot more about financial ratios and how to present all this. And like I said, I made you a video exactly on how to produce visual aids for your financial ratios using Excel and making pretty charts and graphs. So some of you might already be familiar with that, but I made you a video specifically on that topic. And then one other thing that I thought I put on this sheet, which is why I said I think this might be the wrong version. There should be a 6B. 6B, which you should include some form of excerpts from your financial statements. After all, we're in financial accounting class. So it doesn't need to be full-blown financial statements. In fact, I don't want you to present the full financial statements. It'll be too much data to take in, too much information squeezed onto the screen. But you might say, well, I was looking at these 2 retail companies and it was really telling looking at their income statement that when I look at sales minus COGS equals gross margin, you can see that this one has a much higher gross profit margin. So it might tie in with your financial ratios, but give us just that little excerpt from your financial statements that help you ultimately make your decision. Later, as we get to chapter 12, I'll show you some things to look for in terms of the statement of cash flows that we want to look for in our financials. So you might end up using an excerpt from your statement of cash flows that tells you that the one company is healthier than the other in terms of cash flows. So any of the financial statements are eligible, but not the full financial statement, just some little excerpt from the financial statement. Okay, so some little small piece of it, not the whole thing. So excerpt from the financial statements that, points to a deciding factor as to which company is better. And then finally, number 7, you're going to compare and contrast all these factors for the two companies and arrive at your conclusion, your recommendation of which company's stock you would buy. In number 7, you do have to pick a company. You can't say, oh, they're both good, or no, they're both bad. You have to pick one. So as long as you support it with business and financial reasoning, like I said, there's no wrong answer, but ultimately you have to pick one. If you're having a hard time, I've got a couple tips for you that I'll get to in just a moment. So speaking of, let me jump to the tips. Let's see. So in terms of my tips for you, first, I'm most interested in your analysis. In terms of the research and the data gathering, I could go look up all the information needed for this project in probably 30 minutes. Okay. I'm interested on your ability to organize that and to analyze it and come up with an opinion. So make sure that as you're doing this, that you're selecting information, that you're selecting articles, you're explaining ratios and financial statements that are relevant to making your decision as to which company is better. If you're including tons of other information that doesn't help make that decision, then you might consider leaving some of that out. Like I said, I'm not looking for you to start your paper with, on a dark, stormy night, a baby was born. I don't need the whole life story of the CEO of the company. I need information relevant to today as to how will we decide which company is better. So I'd say spend less time talking about the history of the company and more time talking about where they're at today and how we're going to make this decision. Second tip, don't confuse net income with stock price. I don't expect you guys to be stock market analysts. I don't expect you to know everything about the stock market, but don't try to jump to the conclusion that a higher net income definitely equals a higher stock price. And I say that specifically, especially in the fall semester. We've got Black Friday coming up at the end of the month during your project timeframe. And I had a student one time say, well, here's our stock price graph. And you can see that the stock price went way up on this Friday, and that was Black Friday, and that's why the stock price went up, because they had a lot of sales that day. Not necessarily. That's not quite how it works. So yes, I do want your opinion. Yes, I do want you to make some conclusions, but that's kind of a big leap to go from, well, it's Black Friday and sales were high, and therefore that's why the stock price was up. That's too far of a leap for me. Okay. If you do know some about the stock market, it can be very volatile, and it actually involves a lot of what I consider to be interesting psychology, that people believe that a company is going to do well. And so it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy that if you think a company is going to go up and everybody jumps on that bandwagon and everybody buys that stock, guess what happens? There's more demand for the stock, and therefore the stock price goes up. So there's a lot of psychology within the stock market. There's a lot of looking in crystal balls and predicting what's going to happen in the future. I don't need you to do all of that. Karina, is there a blacklist for what companies we can't do? You cannot do Walmart versus
Target.
Right? I'm tired of Walmart versus Target. I'd prefer not to see Home Depot versus Lowe's again. I'm kind of over it. But in terms of your companies, you need to choose companies where you can describe what they do in a couple sentences, that they're not a conglomerate. So a conglomerate means a company that does a lot of different things. And you need to be looking at the parent company. So I get students say, well, I want to do Disneyland versus Magic Mountain. Okay, so who is that? That's Disney, the whole corporation Disney, not just Disneyland. So you'd have to look at the entire corporation of Disney. They do a lot of things. It's not just an amusement park, right? They do a lot of things.
Television channel.
Versus Magic Mountain, which is Six Flags, a publicly traded company, but they really just do amusement parks. So is that really a fair comparison to look at Disney versus Six Flags? I don't think
Berry Farm, they have a lot of other things.
That's right. That would be a better one. And so there's a company called Cedar Fair that runs amusement parks. But no, Disney would be considered a conglomerate. Karina, Amazon would be fine. We can define what they do. There are other companies that they could be compared to in the tech space. But yeah, Amazon does have its finger in more things than they used to, but Amazon would still be fair game. But like, for example, GE, that's a giant conglomerate. It's not just light bulbs and refrigerators. They do everything. They own media and TV stations and insurance companies, and they make light bulbs and refrigerators and washers and dryers and vacation service. Yeah, very good. So that would be a giant conglomerate. So if you can't describe what they do in a couple sentences, and you got to make sure that you're comparing two companies that are competing in the same market. And a lot of the companies that we might be familiar with are these big conglomerates that do lots of different things. So I'll show you some sources on where to find companies that maybe you're not as familiar with. Let me keep going with the tips. Don't straddle the fence. So at the end, you do have to choose one company. You can't tell me they both suck. And that might be true, but you still have to pick the less bad one. Or maybe they're both fantastic. So if you're stuck trying to figure out which one to choose, then I would suggest that you define your criteria. What are you looking for? Are you looking for a safe long-term investment? Are you looking for a short-term risky investment that, you know, this company might do amazing or they might not, but we're willing to take that risk? I had a group present that one time, that they present all about company A, which was a well-known, reputable company, financially healthy, but probably going to be a long-term, slow growth kind of company, versus another new upcoming company. Company B was kind of this under the radar, brand new company, new in this space and kind of uncertain. And they get to the end of the project and they say, we choose company B. And you could see everybody like, oh, they chose the wrong company. But then they said, look, it happened to be a group of four young guys. And they said, look, we're young, so we have lots of time. We're risk takers. And we understand that this investment could go bad, but we believe if this company does take off, that we're going to like make 5 times on our money, or they might be a total loser. So they owned it, that this was a high risk investment, and they explained why, and that's totally fine. So like I said, there's no wrong answer, but just support and explain that conclusion. If you do think it's risky, then say that it's okay. Or you might say, no, I'm going with the safe bet with this long-term slow growth company. It may not be very exciting, but it's what we're comfortable with. That's okay. So just explain it. Next bullet point, please make sure that you practice your presentation. Practice it together with your group, know how it's going to flow and transition from one part to the next, figure out who's going to run the slides and how all that's going to work. I'd also suggest, as much as I want you to be practiced and know your information, please don't go to the other extreme and just read at us, because you can feel when somebody reads at you. And it really, it's hard to listen to. If we're going to sit there and listen to 6 or 7 group projects in a day, and each of you is just going to read a script at me, I'm going to fall asleep. So I need you to actually know your information. And, you know, sure, there might be certain parts, a quote, certain data that you need to read. But for the most part, you should be able to speak comfortably and freely about your companies. I do expect you at least to be our classroom expert on those companies. Okay. Finally, in terms of your written report, well, you're going to be turning it in online, but back when people used to turn in reports in person, I'd get students that are printing on nice paper and color printers and putting it in a fancy report cover. I don't want any of that. You're turning it in online, so there is no opportunity to be fancy. You're turning it in as a Word doc or a PDF. It's a file attachment. What I'm looking for really is good writing. I'm looking for good college level writing, good analysis of the information, not just a regurgitation of information, but good analysis of that information pointing to how you arrive at your conclusion. Okay, so longer isn't better, more words isn't better, but thoughtful writing and good analysis. There's 4 of you in your group, so I fully expect spelling and grammar to be perfect. I'm looking for college level that vocabulary and sentence structuring. With 4 of you in a group and you guys can proofread for each other and offer constructive criticism, I think all that goes without saying. But really what I'm looking for is good content, but mostly using that content to analyze and make a decision. Okay, so that's all that. Do you guys have any questions initially? Because then I'm going to jump over to the internet and show you where to find a lot of information. You're good for the moment? Okay, I'm going to go over to the magical internet and we're going to go to, I got too much stuff in my way. That down there. I'm going to go to Yahoo, yahoo.com/finance. Okay. And that looks like this, not super exciting, but what you'll find is just a wealth of information in a relatively concise format. So let's say that I want to look up Walmart versus Target. So I could start by just typing in Walmart, and what comes up here, we see all these different choices, but this top one is what we're looking for. Over here, WMT, that's what we call the ticker. Okay, that's their call sign or their ticker that we look up Walmart under WMT on the stock market. When you tell me what your companies are, I want you to tell me the ticker. That tells me that you looked it up and you confirmed that it's traded on a US exchange. When I say a US exchange, we're looking for the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ. If it's referencing other countries, excuse me, that's not the one we're looking for. So yeah, Walmart does trade on the exchange in Mexico, but that's not what we want. We want Walmart that trades on a US exchange, primarily the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ. So I can just type in Walmart and that comes up, and then I'll click on Walmart and it takes me to what I call to the company's homepage or their home screen within Yahoo. So what we know right now is Walmart right now is trading at $150.06. And this is almost real time. If you were doing this company, you would want to gather this data after the market closes each day. So after 1 p.m. Pacific. Okay. From this main page, what else can we find? So thinking of the project criteria, you're going to gather the stock closing price each day for 10 days after the market closes at 1 p.m. You're going to gather the PE ratio each day for 10 days after the market closes. We're going to learn later what PE ratio means. Other things under financial ratios, I asked you for the earnings per share. That's their earnings per share. And EPS, earnings per share, that one you can just grab one time. I don't need 3 years side by side, just grab it one time. I'd say the same with dividends. I don't need 3 years side by side, just grab it one time. So we actually just knocked out a lot of information on one screen, right? So we're going to gather the stock price and the PE ratio every day for 10 days. We're going to write down the earnings per share and the dividend. They express it as a dollar amount and as a percentage. So $2.20, which equates to 1.47%. Okay. So that's that information. Other information here, obviously we see the stock price chart, and this is just what's happened today. So we see that it's green, that means Walmart is up today, but let's look at it for 5 days or a month or 6 months. So we can expand this out to get a different view of how Walmart's been doing. So over the past 5 years, it looks like Walmart stock's gone up quite a bit. How about Max? You love this. I'm gonna go full screen for you. Let's go Max. Tell me you invested in Walmart back in the 70s, right? This is a classic lower left to upper right stock price chart. Yes, you wish that you put your money into Walmart back in the 70s and 80s and that you sat on it for all this time, because then you would be wealthy. But so what else can we do with this? So remember that we don't necessarily need that max view. So here's just 2 years. Here's a year of what Walmart's done. Now let's say that we're comparing Walmart versus Target. So I can go here and click on comparison. and I can put in Target, TGT, or I could type in Target. So I'm going to put Walmart and Target on the same chart. I'm going to make Target red because that makes sense in my head that Walmart's blue and Target's red. Isn't that convenient? So I can chart my two companies on the same graph and see how they're doing for this period. So this is just in the last year. So which company would you make more money with just over the last year? So if I was going to invest 1 year ago today, I wish I would have put my money in Target over Walmart. Not that Walmart did bad, they made 8.19%, but Target is up 71.57%. Doesn't that sound better? So that's in the past year. What about the last 2 years? Target outperformed. Past 5 years, Target still outperformed in the last 5 years. Does that surprise some of you?
Not really.
How about Max? Over the long haul, Walmart crushed it. So there's that. And all those D's down there, we can remove those from the chart if we don't want to see all that, but those are when they paid dividends. So I can get rid of all that and clean it up a little bit. But ultimately, remember in part 4, you're going to track the stock price for 10 days and you're going to present your 10 days as a chart or graph. But then I want you to launch into a longer term graph, and you can use Yahoo and then paste this into your project. So you might show something like this, that, you know, both are doing well, but it looks like Target's gone up more than Walmart in the past year. But then my question is, how does that make you feel about investing? Do you want to invest in a company that's already high? So if we're playing the stock market where we want to buy low, sell high, well, if it's already high, that means you got to buy high and sell higher. Is it going to go up that much more? Not sure. That'll be for you guys to analyze and decide. But it's not just simply, well, the one that's higher is better. We're looking for the investment opportunity. We're looking for an opportunity to make money. So it's not slam dunk that Target is better and we should invest in Target. It might be that Walmart is a strong company, but their stock price seems to be a bit depressed and there's this huge opportunity to invest and it's going to go up. So that'll be for you guys in your group to analyze and decide. But what you'll see is as you look at different time frames, it tells a little bit different story. So if I look at year to date versus 6 months versus just 5 days, it tells a different story as to what's going on and how these companies are doing. So you guys choose the time frame that helps you make your decision looking forward. But I hope that gives you some tools on how to do stock price charts. Let's go back to the main page. Part 2, I asked you for news headlines. And yeah, you can just search the internet or you can scroll down the page here. And what you'll find is a news section. And there's all kinds of news down here, most of it relevant to Walmart. So most of the news that you'll find at the bottom of the screen is relevant to whatever company you've searched in the top half of the screen. Okay, so here they're talking specifically about Walmart. This retailer will dominate in a recession. Oh, that's kind of nice to know. If I was doing Walmart, I'd want to include this article. So for the most part, the articles and the sources that you find here are reputable and respectable. You can use them. So specifically, I always get a lot of questions like The Motley Fool. Is that an okay publication to use? I've never heard of that. Yes, it's a well-respected financial publication. Insider Monkey, same thing. Bloomberg, well-respected. So pretty much all of these sources that you'll find here on Yahoo Finance are respected, acceptable sources to use for your project. Zacks, Investopedia, Yahoo Finance itself. So lots of different sources and lots of different articles. So this would be a great starting point if you're the person doing number 2 and looking up news and headlines about your companies. Okay. Other things to do your financial ratios and for your financial statement excerpts. I want you to come over here to financials. And what you'll find is that Yahoo provides you 3, sometimes 4 years of financial statements in a pretty much uniform format from one company to the next, all side by side. So if I want to compare if I want to compare Walmart versus Target, I can come here and at the click of the button, I've got 4 years of income statements side by side. So I could use that to compute financial ratios, and it'll be done in a very similar format to other competitors, which makes it really easy to compare. And you'll notice here at the top, there's the income statement, the balance sheet, and the statement of cash flows. So all of that data that you need in order to compute your financial ratios, it's all right here in Yahoo in the financial statements in this uniform format. So we've got 4 years of balance sheet side by side. I can look at the statement of cash flows, which we're going to learn more in depth about in chapter 12. But they've got operating, investing, and financing cash flows, and we can understand overall if their cash has gone up or down. And again, they've got 4 years all side by side. So we can look at, is their cash coming in? Is it going out? Is it from operations, or are they borrowing more money? What's going on? So in chapter 12, I'll teach you a little bit more about how to analyze that. But again, usually 4 years of financial statements all side by side in the financials here on Yahoo, which is pretty convenient. If you go to the company's 10K report, you will find the financials there, and they're good, valid, and probably a little bit more detailed than what you'll find on Yahoo. But in terms of finding side-by-side comparable format, Yahoo's actually better. Okay, so I highly recommend this source. Other things that you'll find here in Yahoo Finance, if you go to the company profile, so we don't need to know all the officers of the company, but if you don't fully understand what the company does, you can read their own description of themselves and get a better idea of what they do and maybe some competitors. So that's under profile. Other things that you might want to look at, they give analysts opinions. So you can look at what analysts are saying about the company under the analyst tab in terms of trends. So that's the financial analyst. Oh, it's conversations, I think. No, they changed the heading. So there used to be something on here that would give you what professional stock market analysts were saying about the company. So that's not it. Maybe they took it off. That's okay. Mostly interested in your analysis, but sometimes it helps to read what other professionals are seeing about the company, but you guys can find that. In terms of competitors, if I go back to summary, a lot of times it'll put other similar companies over here on the right under people also watch. That doesn't mean that they're all slam dunk competitors. You still have to, say, okay, is Home Depot really a competitor with Walmart? Kind of. I mean, they're both big box retailers, but, are they really head-to-head competitors? Well, no, Walmart versus Target would be better. Home Depot versus Lowe's would be better. Again, I'm kind of bored with both of those. But I'll give you some other ideas. Other things to consider, just look up different industries. So not everything needs to be retail. If we go to finance home, look at what companies are coming up, be creative, think about other things. So as you scroll around, look at other companies and what industries that they're in, see what's going on. So read a little news, different watch lists. So lots of ways to consider, different companies, different industries. So just click around a little bit before you just pick the first 2 companies that come to mind. When it comes to selecting companies, there's no duplicate companies. So I can't have 2 groups doing Walmart versus Target, but I don't even want 2 groups doing Walmart versus anything. So there will be no duplicate companies in terms of your company selection. Your company selection is subject to my approval. So when you choose your companies, you're going to send it to me to actually get that approved. And if I don't approve of it, I'll give you maybe some other suggestions or ideas. Or maybe if you have multiple ideas, you can send me all of your ideas and say, would you approve any of these? For the most part, I try to approve what you pick, but I'm going to try to help you choose companies that are doable. When I say doable, that means not a conglomerate, a company that you can easily research. So if their financials are expressed in Japanese yen instead of dollars, I'm going to encourage you to pick a company that expresses their financial statements in US dollars so you can compare the two companies head to head, right? So I'm going to try to guide you toward companies that are going to allow you to do a great job on the project and not give you a bunch of hangups and hiccups. Kind of think that's it for the moment. Do you guys have any questions of me right now?